What did Duck say?
Quack, quack.
Yes. I can't answer that right now, but be right with you. But he
Okay.
says, if I do this, I'll get to see my granddaughter. So I'm going to have to say bye now. Bye. Hey,
Hi.
how are you?
I'm
Wait. Just a minute. Okay.
Okay, great.
So I have an
Are you-
important question for you.
Okay, shoot.
So,
I'm usually the one who asks the questions, so this is nice.
well, I just need to know because I do a lot of Zoom meetings every day and lots of classes. And I know that the people I'm Zooming with have been quarantining themselves and I don't need to wear a mask.
You don't need to wear a mask. No, you
So
are.
I don't need to wear a mask for this?
Well, how do you feel safest? Would you feel better in a mask?
It doesn't feel good at all in the mask. It's hot. and
It's itchy. Okay.
So if you can assure me that this is safe, I'm going to take it off.
I can guarantee you that this over the internet interaction is completely safe and you don't have to wear a mask.
Good to know.
Okay, perfect.
Whew, it is hot inside a mask. You ever wear a mask?
I wear a mask every day at work.
It's hot.
All day. It's hot. And people can't hear you and they're itchy, but it's the right thing to do. Because masks aren't for keeping you safe from others. They're for keeping others safe from you.
Yes. And I don't know if this is a surprise to you, but I have quite a few of them now.
Masks? It's not a shock. Morgan and I just ordered some that are serape. We got Fiesta masks on the way.
Really?
Yep.
I might be
feeling pretty good about
that.
it. They sold out really quick, but
Yeah.
I know a guy who knows a guy.
Okay.
Perfect.
I'm your person. Remember me.
It's hard to forget you, Mom.
Mother's Day coming.
That's true. Well, now I know what to do. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank
Yes.
you. Nailed it. Well, Mom, welcome to Quarantime. You were on a phone call. Normally I would do an introduction. I had a smoke machine and lasers all set up. So hold on real quick.
Oh,
Here.
yeah.
There you go. Kathy Edwards.
That is so special.
Huh?
I love that.
Lots of other people wanted the lasers. You got I saved the lasers for your episode. They might be hard to see. I'm waiting on the lights to come in the mail.
Are those the curtains I made?
They are.
They look nice.
Thank you.
They look great.
Yes, Dad. Great timing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. So, welcome to Quarantime. This used to be a show for snoozers by snoozers. Snooze, obviously, being the place I work. But you are my first episode with a guest outside of Snooze.
Ooh.
You're going to be my first episode where we're steering in two different directions. I'm going to keep making episodes specifically for Snooze, but this episode is also for the world. So full disclosure, some of your friends and family may end up seeing this, and I have no idea how to edit things out.
Okay.
So now you know anything you say can and will end up on the internet. But
Okay,
welcome
good
to a very super special episode. And so this show, I'm assuming you haven't watched any episodes yet because not very many people have, is a show about what we're all doing as a human species during this super weird COVID-19 new reality that we're all learning about.
Yeah.
And beyond being my mom and a super cool human, you are also in charge of a school.
Yes, I am.
And so I guess what I would love to dig into a little bit is, first and foremost, who are you? What do you do?
So, I'm your mom.
Thank you.
I met you, how old are you? 30?
35. 36.
36?
I'm 35. I'm 35 or 36.
So I met you 35 or 36 years ago.
Yes.
And you happen to be one of the reasons why I'm now sitting in this school today.
Like I bought it? I bought it for you?
No, but I do need about $8 million.
Well, we can talk a little bit more about that $8 million in a little bit.
All right.
So when you say I'm one of the reasons that you're sitting in this school, what does that mean? First, so the school that you're sitting in, What is it? Can you tell us where you
So the
work?
school I'm sitting in is the Novus Academy, and we're in Grapevine, Texas. And the Novus Academy is something that I always thought could be possible, dreamed about, but never thought it would actually happen. And so Novus is a school for primarily for students with learning differences. Students don't have to have learning differences to come here, but it's different than any other schools. I wanted to create a model of what education could be and needs to be in our country. And so that's what Novus is.
So now you say that 35 years ago you met me, and then I somehow led you to this magical school for students with learning differences. I'm assuming that's because I was such an easy child to take care of that you wanted to create a place for parents that weren't as lucky as you, or?
No, actually, you were going to be an only child because you were so difficult.
Oh.
You may not
Okay.
remember this, but I can't remember the exact number, but by the time you were like 4 years old, 3 or 4, you had been, the polite thing to say is you had been asked to leave about 5 childcare settings, but you were kicked out.
Oh.
You were kicked out. You were that difficult. You were kicked out.
Do you remember any specific reason I got kicked out from
I do.
any of those childcare settings?
I do. There are 2 that are just seared into my brain.
Okay.
One was that you would not be quiet during nap time, and you wouldn't sleep during nap time, and you just kept talking. And when I said, well, he's not going to sleep, he doesn't sleep ever. But if you just let him lay on the mat or the cot or whatever it was with some books, he won't bother anyone. And I remember the lady saying, well, we can't do that here. And about a week later, here's how it works when it happens. They call you into the office. You think you're going to just sign your child out of childcare?
Uh-huh.
When you get called to the office, that's when they tell you.
Oh, no.
So that's one, but the one that's really seared into my brain,
Mm-hmm.
it was a faith-based childcare center.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing wrong with faith-based childcare center.
Nope.
I only share it because it'll help you understand a little bit about what happened.
Oh,
I went
God.
to pick you up one day in the classroom you were in. I guess you must have been 4. Yeah, you're about 4. And the classroom you were in it was a classroom, and then next to the classroom was restroom, and then another classroom. So the 2 classes shared the restroom. And when I got called in to the director's office, she asked me to sit down, and she was so uncomfortable. And she kind of hemmed and hawed, and she said, Mrs. Edwards, there's something very wrong with your boy.
No.
And I said, like what? And she said, well, it is highly likely that he has a sexual issue.
Oh, God.
You were like 3 or 4 years old. And so by then, though, you'd already been thrown out of other childcare centers. And so I just said, well, okay, so what exactly did he do? Here's what you did.
Oh, God.
Let's see if you remember this.
Mm-hmm.
You were in the restroom with some other kids.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently one of the little boys in there with you
Mm-hmm.
taught you how you can play the guitar with your penis.
Nope.
And you apparently threw the door open to the other classroom, which was younger children,
Oh, no.
had your penis in one hand,
Mm-hmm.
and with the other, you went, na 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 na. So, which is kind of the beginning of how we get to the Nova story, because
Uh-huh.
I didn't know if that was normal or not normal. So that's when we got an appointment with the Child Study Center in Fort Worth, Texas, to have you evaluated and to find out what was.
Probably a good idea.
Yeah. So it turns out, no, you're fine. You're fine. No problem. You are impulsive. I should say,
Don't say.
you were impulsive. It's possible you might still be impulsive.
I think you call it impulsive. I feel like I had become a subject matter expert and I wanted to share a new skill. I think that's called educating.
You didn't think that at the time.
No, well, and maybe at the time I thought I was just great at the guitar.
Exactly. Exactly.
So from the age of 4 or 5, I'd been kicked out of a few places.
A lot.
And Child Study Center told you I'm impulsive, and so
No,
then
no,
it was
no.
just,
The Child Study Center didn't say you're impulsive. They gave you some labels.
oh, share. Well, I'm comfortable with this. Let's share those labels.
And here's the interesting part of it. It turns out you kind of set a history there because you were one of the youngest children they ever gave these labels to at the time. Now, as it turns out, the labels are used now, but back then they were kind of new labels. And
okay, I'm a trendsetter.
Completely.
What trends did I set?
So the labels were ADHD and ODD. And
ODD.
so, well, ODD is oppositional defiant disorder, which basically means you're bad.
I think they hit the nail on the head.
Yeah. Basically what it means is you were a child that was one of those, I want what I want when I want it, and you better give it to me. And I'm going to make sure it happens. And I don't know where you got that from. For the life of me, I don't know where you got that from. And so I don't know if you remember this, but back then, well, you wouldn't know this part. Back then, there were no like therapy or books about it or anything. It was the new subjects. And so there was this day we were living in Carrollton, and I would listen to talk radio back then. And it was summertime. You were throwing a fit in the back seat of the car, and somebody on the radio was talking about a new book about attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And so I decided I'm gonna go buy that book. And I literally whipped the car into a Walden bookstore parking lot. I went to get out of the car. I was so mad at you. I said, don't you move. You stay in this car. You immediately kicked the door open into a brand new Cadillac, dented it. I went inside. This super pregnant lady that worked in the Walden bookstore said, how can I help you? And I said, I need whatever the book was. I don't want to talk to you about anything else. I just need this book. Got the book, got back in the car, left a note on the windshield saying, here I am, contact me if you need to. And the reason I know it was a brand new Cadillac, because she contacted me.
Oh no.
Yeah. So, but that's where it all started.
Okay. So, great. This has been eye-opening. This is not the direction I thought this would take, but I'm so glad it did. And I'm sure that's what you thought to yourself as I was growing up. So that leads us to raising somebody like me with ADHD and oppositional defiant disorder. Mm-hmm. Before those were even things, I imagine my education growing up was strained. I would say my teachers were strained or overwhelmed or just mean. What did that look like from your point of view, and how did it lead you to where you are?
So it was rough because they didn't know what to do with you either, and we didn't know what to do with you. And so what ended up happening is I was discovering, because I was taking you to Child Study Center and learning about this and buying every book when a book would come out. And I discovered that I found myself sitting in meetings with teachers and principals, being the one, they would say to me, we don't know what to do with him. What do you suggest we do? And discovered I was the one that was actually telling them what could work. And then that would have been kindergarten, first grade, because in first grade, we lived in Carrollton, Texas. I don't know if you remember this one, but in Carrollton, oh, wait a minute. So here is the reason why I finally decided. You got kicked out of the child care center, and it was one of the few times in Texas that it had snowed, and you used to throw temper tantrums that were like, like most children, it might be 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 45, maybe an hour. Yours would be hours. And so I read about this new thing called timeout. And this new thing called timeout meant that when you were doing that, you needed to go to timeout until you were ready we could talk about what you had done. And it was about socks. I was trying to get you to put some socks on. And about an hour and a half into your tantrum about getting a sock on your foot, I decided enough. So I remembered, I learned about timeout. So I put myself outside on the patio and left you inside. It was a sliding glass door and snow was on the ground. I was in my nightgown and you reached up and you locked the sliding glass door. So I was outside, you were inside, no cell phones or anything like that. Your dad worked in Dallas. And so I went across the street to our neighbor's house. They literally they pulled their car up with, I don't remember their names, but when they pulled their car up and they got out, they were coming home from the hospital with their brand new baby. And I show up in my nightgown asking if I can use their phone to call your dad to come let me in the house. And so like an hour and a half later, you're inside the house crying. I'm on the outside in a nightgown in the snow. Your dad got there and I got in. So that was what made the final, yeah, we're going Child Study Center. And then the first time I realized how bad this can be for parents is that, and by bad, I mean, it's difficult, it's horrible. People don't understand. People would, we'd get stopped when I'd be out with you. I'd get stopped all the time and people would come up. Like, I remember this man one time in a Mervyn store, he came up and he said, if you just whoop his ass, he'd be fine. Because you had literally, you taken your hand, I picked you up, you taken your hand and you completely wiped out on an end cap at the, at a Mervyn's, all this glass stuff, you wiped the whole stuff out, it fell on the floor. And I'm trying to get you out of there. And so that happened all the time. And, but what I didn't realize until it happened was I was a teacher, first grade. When you were in first grade, I was a teacher. And you were taking some medication at the time that caused you, one of the side effects was you would suck your arm and it would make bruises. And so you had a lot of bruises on your arms. And so instead of like pulling me in like most people would, they contacted Child Protective Services and assumed that we were abusing you because your arms were covered with bruises. And that's when I realized that it's so much bigger than being as simple as being having a child that other people don't want around and having a child that's very difficult to raise. Then I realized that, like in that moment, because I was a teacher and they contacted Child Protective Services and the whole process, in that process, like I could have lost my credentials and lost my job. And that's when it really, I really started realizing that we don't know enough and something's not right. And so I was a special education teacher, high school special ed teacher. And it happened pretty fast that I realized the stuff that we were taught as special education teachers that we're taught to this day, that is being taught in college and university programs about how to work with kids with disabilities, learning differences. It's not what's best and right, because it's based on some misguided beliefs. It's based on this belief that as a teacher, if I can make you feel good about yourself, then you're gonna feel good about yourself and you'll feel like you're doing well. And to do that, you create artificial success. And by that, I mean, you make things so easy, it's not possible for you being a child who struggles, it's not possible for you not to get a high grade. And I started looking at all this stuff and realized that if you take a step back and look at all of this, no human being gets better at anything by doing less. And so how will it ever make sense that we take the children who struggle the most and we expect less of them, when in fact, they need to practice more, they need to do more. And that's when I really started looking at, this doesn't make sense. And still to this day, there's a belief that we teach children basic reading, writing, and math skills through the end of third grade. And from fourth grade on, you use those skills. So if you don't have them, if you're not on grade level by the end of third grade, odds are very high you never will be. Because the belief is if someone has tried to teach you those skills, maybe you were in a preschool program, pre-K, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, and you still don't have them, you never will. And so that's when schools and teachers, we start switching to, it's called compensatory strategies. And compensatory means you compensate for the child's inability to learn. And that's when things like, if, let's say you struggle in math, and so all the kids in the math class are going to do 15 math problems. The one who struggles with math might be told to just do the evens, or just do the odds, or just do 4. And the problem with all that is if the teacher believes that for the students in the class to master, to gain the skills that the teacher's teaching, and the class needs to do 15 problems, and you have the child who struggles the most with it do half or less, how's that child ever going to gain skills? And they don't. Yeah. And so rarely do you see true measurable academic progress beyond fourth grade, unless there are some specific interventions. And it's, you always tell people, it's not because teachers are bad. It's not because teachers don't want to help a child. It's based on several things. One, they've been taught to not expect a lot. And the way our schools are structured, they really can't. They really can't. And so here, I learned something when just kind of fast forward, because it goes to why Novus, why I decided to start Novus. When you were in high school, remember you were at one school and you got thrown out of that school.
That one I remember.
The first grading period happened to be your first private school, happened to be tuition that we could barely afford. And what I didn't know back then was a lot of private schools have a part on the contract that you can pay not very much money to take out insurance. And back then it would have been $25 if I had checked the box. And the insurance is so that if for some reason you're asked to leave the school or you have to leave the school, that we wouldn't have had to pay the tuition.
Oh no.
But I didn't see the box. I didn't notice the box because I too have the ADHD, so I didn't see the box. And we ended up having to pay the tuition. And so, but what happened was you were in 9th grade, and that was the first time in your entire lifetime you made a friend, one friend. Before you were a freshman in high school, you had 0 friends, never invited to a party, babysitters never came more than one time. It was a tough situation, and I could never figure it out because you weren't weird. There was nothing about you that was off-putting. There was nothing obvious that would cause that to happen, but you didn't have any. And I remember you coming home from school saying you were so excited because you'd made a friend. And then we met the friend that you'd made, and he was a nice boy. And then wasn't much after that you came home one day and asked if I would come to school because there was a theater production for Godspell. And you want to know if I'd come. And I thought, well, we didn't know you were doing that. And I just assumed, well, you had to be one of the people that moves furniture in the dark, because we'd never seen any sign of you could sing or dance or perform. And I remember 2 things that completely changed who I am. Well, there are actually 3 things that completely changed who I am as a mother and as a person. And I'll come back to 8th grade and what happened in 8th grade. But you'd made well, we saw Godspell. And I remember sitting in that seat, and it was like this out-of-body experience, because you weren't moving furniture in the dark. You had a lead role. And this is not just your mother speaking. You were good. You were really good. And we'd never seen any sign of that. There's no sign of that. And then you were in show choir. And I remember going to the show choir parent meeting, because your dad and I had never been to any kind of an organized anything meeting for you because you just weren't doing those things. And I remember going to the meeting and none of the parents would talk to us. And I didn't know how that stuff was supposed to work. I didn't know why. And then we found out that the parents of the kids in show choir had recognized the talent in their children years ago, and they'd been taking them to voice coaches and putting them in productions and things like that. And then here we come along because you made show choir, you knocked one of the kids out of show choir. Mm-hmm. And so we were ostracized because who were we? And so then, I thought about it and I realized, at that point I didn't care, because when you're raising a child that's not accepted by others, you kind of get this facade or this, you don't want to get your feelings hurt again, so you just don't expect it. But my takeaway from that is I realized one day, and this was well after I was talking to a parent, because I've been an advocate for parents that struggle to get their children what they need in schools. And I was talking to this parent, and then I remember it was just like this, whoa, wait a minute. We are thinking about this all wrong. And we, being parents of children with disabilities or disorders or differences. And here's why we think about it differently. And can I use you as an example?
Please.
So if when you were young, we knew that you had this natural talent, that you're charismatic, that you can do the things you do. If we had known that, because that's something that parents like to brag. Parents like to see their children doing things well. And so if we'd known about that, we would have been like every other parent that has a child like that. And we would have taken you to, it's like if your child's a good athlete, you get them on select teams. And if your child has musical talent, you find a voice coach or community productions, which is what all the show choir parents had done. Mm-hmm. And then I realized this is why we were thinking wrong, because I took a step back. And if you think about it this way, if let's just use show choir because you were in show choir. So if the parents of those kids thought that the teachers in school were good enough to maximize their kids' potential, they wouldn't go out and find private coaches or theater things. Parents of kids that are gifted athletes, if they felt that the school was enough, the coaches in the school were enough, they wouldn't put them on select teams. They wouldn't do that. And so then I realized, here's all that's happening. All that's happening is the parent is bringing the child to the school and having the coaches or the theater director or, whomever, art teacher, they're having the school do what the school does on their own, with their own money, with their own time. They're taking their children to another teacher, an instructor that has the time and the ability to improve the skill. And they're making sure that their child is with like-minded children to practice the skill. And so if you flip it to parents of kids who struggle, most parents of children who struggle fight with schools because they want the school to fix them or cure them, when in fact it should be no different. If it needs to be no different in that, let's work with the school as a parent of children who have learning differences, work with the school, find the best school you can find, and embrace and really accept the fact that you can't drop, if you have a child who struggles, you cannot drop him or her off on the doorstep of anyone's school and drive away and expect some miracle to happen. As a parent, you have to work harder than you would have to with sibling, your other children. Also, it's just this thing that I started playing with for years. And then I was teaching at TCU in the College of Education and realized that I did just a tiny bit of work with adult literacy. And I realized, wait a minute, if it's true that children that aren't on grade level in reading, writing, and math by the end of third grade never will be because you've exhausted your options, That can't be true, because how do we take adults who are functionally illiterate and teach them to read and write? And the only difference is it's motivation of the learner.
Mm-hmm.
The adult is motivated to learn the skill, and it's the right instructor. It's an instructor who has the ability to take a person who doesn't know how to read and teach them to read, because they're motivated to learn. And so that was really the last piece I needed to realize none of what we do in our schools with kids who, and I shouldn't say none of it, most of what we do with our kids who struggle is not what's best and right for kids. And so then I decided to go ahead. Well, I didn't decide it on my own. Something had happened, and I had 12 families counting on me to start a high school, but the organization that I was working for wouldn't let me do it. And so then we teach students that if you live a full life, a rich life, you have to fully embrace those moments of despair. When terrible, horrible things happen, you have to let it wash over you and consume you for a short period of time. And then you have to switch to, okay, what am I supposed to learn here? What's the lesson about all this? And so what ended up happening is the meeting was in downtown Fort Worth, drove home, which is about a 20-minute drive, completely devastated, because I had 12 parents who paid $22,000 for a year of school, knowing that their children, because these were students who had been 8th graders, were going to become 9th graders. They paid $22,000 for a year, knowing that their kids were going to receive high school level instruction, but they couldn't get high school credit for it because my organization wouldn't let us do that. So they believed it. So they were willing to extend their children's school years by a year and pay $22,000 to do it. Had a staff full of teachers that were counting on me to make it happen. And my organization said, no, you can't do it. So it was your dad who kind of reminded me that, yeah, no, you have to do what you say. Figure it out. I walked into school the next morning. It happened on a Tuesday night. I walked into school next morning on a Wednesday and pulled the assistant principal, and I was principal at the time. And I told him I'm going to start my own school. That was never the plan. And I had no idea how to do it. Not a clue. But I have the ADHD.
The Child Study Center, they call that impulsive. Yes, very good.
And there is a possibility that I might be impulsive. And, but I've also learned how to work with it instead of it having be the problem, to work with it. And so, so what we teach the students is, if you set a goal and you just think it in your head, kind of like a New Year's resolution, I'm going to lose weight. No, you're not. Right. If you write it down, so you think about it, you write it down, you might even put it on the refrigerator. I'm going to lose weight. Yeah, you might try a day or two, but you're not. If you tell one other person, hey, this is what I want to do, will you help me do it? You'll go a little bit longer, but you won't achieve the goal. But if you stand before a group of people and you say, this is what I want to do, I need you to hold me accountable, that's a completely different situation. And so, so I decided I was going to do it. And then what happened is, so for like 2 years, the organization kept trying to fire me. And so the big joke was every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, they tried to fire me. And I would say, here's the thing. You're not going to fire me. You're not going to fire me because you know what'll happen if you do. And basically what would have happened was everybody in the school would have followed me and all that. And so that was kind of there. And then, so I decided I was going to do it. And then my boss came over, and the way it always worked was she'd come over to Grapevine, sit down at the table. She always had a file folder. Sometimes it was inside an envelope. Sometimes it was just the file folder. And she'd always slide it to me, and she'd say, do you want to look at this so we can talk about it? And I'd always say, no. Never opened it, never talked about all the write-ups they were doing. I didn't care. And for whatever reason, that day, I said, you know what? I'm going to open this. And I opened it, and I read it, and it was some ridiculous whatever. And it said if I didn't, I don't remember what it was. If I didn't do whatever, they were going to revisit my employment status.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember pushing that thing over to her and saying, here's the thing. This is our Red Sea moment. This can go one of two ways, because I'm going to start my own school. That was my first time saying it out loud to a person, that there was no turning back. And I said, and this is how this is going to go. We can work together and have this be an amicable separation, or we don't need to. It doesn't matter. You know, I can raise the money. I can do all of this, and you know what's going to happen if I do it. But I don't want that to be that way. I don't want, because the other part of it was within the organization. If I had just decided to start my own school, the larger organization probably would have gone out of business because of just things during that time in the history of the organization. But that's not what I wanted. And I had told the board members, I had said to all of them, as long as I believe that, as long as you're not stopping me from doing what's best and right for the children and families in my care in Grapevine, I'm 100% a part of this organization. If the day comes that you don't allow me to do what's right for the children and families in my care, that's a different story. Because they were always telling me, for years, they would tell me, you need to slow down. You need to, my boss came over one time and he sat across the table from me a coffee table in my office, and he said, you know, here's the thing. You're like this speedboat. You come up with an idea and you do it. And if it works, great, you do more of it. If it doesn't work, you just change course and you do something else. We're like the battleship. It takes us longer. We'll get where you are, but you need to give us more time. So we need you to slow down. And I remember saying that day, I looked at him and I said, which child or family am I supposed to sit across the table from and look in the eye and say, you know what? We know what to do to help your child and family because we've been doing it. But my organization, I call it the mothership. The mothership operates more like a battleship. And so we cannot help the child you're bringing to us today. But if you bring me one in 4 or 5 years, we can, because by then my organization will be ready. And you know me well enough to know that's not going to happen. And so all those things had been at play. And so anyways, that was the week before Thanksgiving break that all this happened. But I made the decision. It was a week before Thanksgiving break. And we ended up, so that would have been November. And 6 months later, in June, the last day of June, we raised the money, negotiated the settlement. That's a whole nother story. Wired the money to the bank in Fort Worth the last day of June and opened Novus Academy July 1, 6 years ago, and haven't looked back. And it's more than I thought it would be, to have the ability to create what's been created, to show people what can be. And so what's happened over these years is we've had a lot of people, a lot of educators, administrators, community members come to see the school. And the thing that comes out of it, like the consensus, the messaging is this, what happens at the Novus Academy is what every child in our country deserves and needs, without regard to anything, socioeconomic status, ability, nothing. And it's pretty cool. It is pretty cool.
It is super cool.
So
wow,
that was a lot.
Yeah, it's quite the journey we took to get here. I have had the opportunity to see you in action. I've had the opportunity to meet your educators and some of your students and see the difference that you've been able to make in their lives. I've been able to see that firsthand. For those people who might be, and trust me, Mom, thousands of people eventually are going to see this thing. Maybe by accident, maybe like it'll scroll across at the bottom of some news story where my neighbors were like, he was such a nice guy, a quiet guy. but eventually people are gonna see this thing. So for those people who haven't had the opportunity to see you in action, what is it about the Novus Academy and its educators that allows you to make that difference, and where can I find out more?
Okay, so it's not some kind of magical formula. It's if you stop and realize that human beings are relational. We, even in the times that we're in right now, we're relational. We crave, we need to be noticed by someone. We need to know that we're loved. We need to know that we're supported. We need to know that we're safe. And I've always worked with the students that are overlooked and underserved and anything but safe and supported in their schools. And so the first step, it begins with the relationship. It begins with treating them completely differently than they've ever been treated in the past. And there are a lot of people that say place doesn't matter, size of class doesn't matter, place doesn't matter. And, you know, and our schools are so bare. You know, if a school is really wild, they might have light gray on the walls instead of beige. But,
whoa,
you know, and so I realized that what needed to happen to begin healing a child, what needed to happen is, and I call it getting their smile back. And so what I tell parents is, you'll know your child is well on their way when their smile returns. Because what happens to a child who struggles is that parents can love their child like crazy and can tell their child that they're wonderful and they're great and all of those things. And a teacher can do it too. But kids are kids. And it doesn't take a child very long to know they're being made fun of, or no one's playing with them, or they're the last one to finish anything. They know it. They know it. And so the smile is what goes away first. And so you can go in any school. I can go in anybody's school, public, private, anywhere in the country, and take a look at a kindergartner, first grader, second grader, third grader, and I can pick out the ones that school is a nightmare for because they don't smile. They've lost their smile. So the first thing that happens to Novus is when children and families walk through the doors, they don't quite know what it is because it doesn't look like any school they've ever been to before. And so that's the first thing, is they don't know what it is. They know it's the Novus Academy. They know it's a school. They've read all the comments and the, you know, but it doesn't look like a school. And it doesn't feel like a school because it feels friendly. And then they meet the dogs because we have dogs here. And in fact, I've got 2 of them with me today. And then we have something that we do every morning. We call it morning celebration. It takes about 45 minutes. And so they're immediately immersed in this celebration and everything that happens there to wake the brain up and do all these things. So it's completely different. And what I discovered, didn't expect, what I discovered was that in most schools, when a student is new, the administrator or the teacher or the counselor, you pick a couple good kids and you ask them to be the buddy of the new student. Like invite them to sit with you at lunch or show them where their classes are, you know, that kind of thing. Well, that doesn't usually result in a friendship, and the older they are, like by the time you get to high school, it's kind of like, you know, they might take you to your classes in the morning, but that's it.
Right.
And so what ended up happening here that I didn't even expect is the kids take over. So I don't ever want a child to be ostracized or isolated or by themselves for whatever reason. And I thought that it would have to be driven by adults. Not for a second. Kids take over. They're the ones that go up and make the new child or the visiting child comfortable and feel welcome. And it's just this thing. And that's what the educators that come and see this, they're blown away by 2 things. The first is the behavior. How polite the students are, how well behaved they are, how well spoken they are, because they're not supposed to be able to do that because they have learning differences. Right. And then when they see it kind of play out in the morning celebration, and they visit the classrooms, they're blown away. And that's what they want. They want to know, how do we take children that can't be taught, and how do we have them outperforming, exceeding expectations? And the most powerful thing for us is when we have the former teachers of a child we have in our school, for them to come in here and see the same child in this space. I think it's so cool, because they always are sobbing. It's like they can't believe that the child is doing what the child's doing, because it's not possible. It's impossible. And so it's just this whole process that begins with relationship, but there's a lot that goes into it.
Right.
And a couple of years ago, we decided to try an experiment to see if we could take children without learning differences, without any exposure to our staff and the way we do things, and see if we could, over the course of 2 weeks, 5 during summer, 2 weeks of a summer program, if by the end of 2 weeks we could have a little bit of, we call it the novice, get a little bit of the novice in them.
Uh-huh.
And it was so cool. It took about 2 days for 100% of them, because it was kids from all these different schools. They didn't know one another. It was just like brand new school, brand new year, brand new teachers. And within 2 days, every one of those kids was completely open, doing everything that we do. By the end of the week, their parents couldn't believe what they were doing, because the other thing our students do is they have no problem. Like, you have a group of people and there's a question asked, and most adults look away as like, don't call on me. Don't call on me. Not our kids. They know they're going to be called on. They know they're going to have to answer it. And so they're just well spoken. So then we realized we can do it like in 2 weeks. Get that. And it's because of the culture. It's the school culture, and it's the knowledge level of the educators. And so now we found an interesting thing with remote learning. And as it turns out, same thing. Because to come here, after I talk to the parents and the student and I take a look at all the information, kids have to come for a 2-day visit. They actually have to come to our school for 2 full days, spend time in our classes so that we can work with them and see if we're right. Well, we're running a full day remote program. So we're having them visit remotely. And out of that, I forgot to tell the teachers that one of the boys that did it recently was actually living 30 minutes out of Washington, D.C. I forgot to tell them that part. So, and they not a clue, because he seamlessly came in, he participated. They only found out because in one of his classes, he made a comment about the weather, which was nothing like our weather. And so the teacher thought, maybe he's, so she asked, well, where are you? And he told her. And then we have one right now who's living in Colorado, but she's in our full day remote program. No different than the kids that are here. And the same behaviors, the same willingness to be so open happens quickly. So it's something to see.
Without even being inside the 4 walls.
Yes.
Wow. So moving to remote learning, how long did it take you to transition? And what would you say the greatest struggle has been, and your well, I guess we can kind of already establish your greatest win being that it's still working. And there's so many schools right now that are just throwing in the towel and saying, let's give up. We came this far, but let's give up. What is keeping you from saying let's give up, and what have you learned in this time?
That's a great question. So it took us 5 school days, because what ended up happening is we were on a cruise during spring break. So second week in March?
Mm-hmm.
And
great time to be on a cruise, by the way.
Yeah, it was the last cruise that actually, we were the last cruisers, and then they shut cruises down. So that wasn't great. But on Wednesday, there were a lot of college students on the cruise because it was their spring break, and everyone was starting to get excited. And then, so I was listening to them. And so what was happening is they were getting notices from their colleges or the universities saying that spring break was extended for a week because of the virus. And so on that Wednesday, my first take on it was, this is excellent. We'll have another week of spring break, which means, so we were on the cruise, and now I'll have a whole week at home to do stuff around the house. And that was Wednesday. And by the time I got up Thursday morning, I realized, oh, whoa, wait a minute. No, that's not how this is going to work at all. Not at all, because this isn't going to just be for a week. And because I had been researching and studying. And so by the time we got off the cruise on Saturday, I'd already decided not only are we going to do remote, but we're going to do full day remote. And I made that decision because our students, and as it's turning out, the country has discovered most students, I took a look at what they need. And so our students need structure. They need support. They need opportunities to interact with others. And in no way was I going to let them lose skills, because that's a whole nother thing. A child without academic struggle is expected to lose about one grading period over the course of a summer, which is why the next school year is sort of a little bit of a review of the prior school year. Well, students with learning differences, they're going to lose between half a year to a third of a year, or maybe the whole year over the course of a summer, which is also another reason why there's no measurable growth from fourth grade on. And so there's no way that was going to happen with our kids. And I wasn't okay with let's just maintain skill. Let's just not lose skill. And so I talked to the teachers we got back on Saturday. Everyone got the notice. I sent, I think, to everyone saying we were extending spring break, but I talked to the teachers and let them know that we're going to do a remote program, and it's going to be full day. Let's figure it out. And we didn't think twice about it, because that's what is best and right. And so here's what we've discovered. All of the things that I mentioned, they need structure, they need support, they need, to be able to interact with peers, and they need support while they're learning, is absolutely true. We didn't fully understand, our country didn't fully understand the mental health, social emotional piece, didn't understand how bad it was going to be for children and families doing this. And what we've discovered is that our students aren't losing any skills, and the ability to be in school all day is letting their parents work from home, because there's no interruption. They're working with us. And the social emotional piece, we take care of that, because that's part of what we do in our program all day, is just skills and strategies. And so the most recent, a lot of the articles I've been reading are the two things that just is just mind-blowing to me, is that schools decided early on, they're not, we know the majority of students in our country are going to lose skills. We know that. And so colleges and universities were the first ones to start talking about and planning for what are we going to do, because the incoming freshmen are not going to be college ready, because they'll have had all this loss of skill. So that was what started in our country. And then it hasn't taken very long for it to now shift to, not only are we looking at loss of skills, unprecedented loss of skills, never before seen it in our country, the loss of skills that are going to be presented whenever kids go back to school. And the primary issue, even worse than academic skill loss, is mental health. Schools aren't equipped to handle the mental health needs that are going to be presented when students come back to school. And then on top of it, the thing that's kind of creeping in a little bit, as a leader of a school, I've been working on it for a while now, but as have other leaders of schools, but it's not out there blatantly yet to families. It's more so the past 2 days. And that's the fact that parents are counting on schools opening in August or September, their kids going back to school so they can go back to work and life returning to normal. That's not going to happen. Not for a second. And when schools can finally open and students can start coming back, there's so many things that we have to be considering, like a report that I got today from Texas. The things that we've got to be working on are things like what personal protection stuff are students and staff going to have to wear? Will there be enough? Who's going to pay for it? Knowing full well, if you've been a child, you know a child, or you've ever seen two or more children together, there's no flipping way. Masks going to stay on, social distancing is going to occur, and as a school, we can sanitize and disinfect behind every single child everything they could possibly touch. Things as simple as going to the bathroom. We'd have to have somebody full time just in there with a spray bottle, spraying everything down. And so that's part of it. The second piece then becomes, are the cleaning materials, are the products going to be there? Because right now, just, it was Lysol, company that makes Lysol. Yesterday, what they're saying is that best guess for that company for disinfectant wipes is that they may start being back on shelves in stores the end of July, maybe. And so then it goes to, okay, how are we going to have the stuff for school? And then the two most critical things, the questions are, how do we keep everyone safe inside our schools? And so, some of the things, one of the go-tos is, I think it's Denmark. Right now, the children line up outside of the school 6 feet apart, and people take temperatures, and if there's no temperature, you come into the school. And so first thing I said was, you know what, wait a minute. I've been part of a lot of schools, whether I was a teacher or I was running the school, and there is no such thing. That's not going to work, because there are an awful lot of parents that can't lose their job, or they might have a meeting that they have to get to. Mm-hmm. Every school in our country, and probably the world, but in our country, there are parents who have to get there. So they'll give their child a fever reducing medication so that they can drop them off at school so they can get to their meeting, knowing that they're probably going to get a call from the school. And so sure enough, hours later, when the medication wears off and the child has a fever, and they get sent to the nurse, and the nurse checks, and sure enough, child has a fever and they're sick, the damage has been done. They've been in our school for hours. And so that's not going to work. And so it's just all of these things. And then it comes down to issues of liability. I think, I'm not great with numbers. I think it's either 60 or 80 educators in New York City have died from COVID-19. Yeah. Working in schools. And so, of course, everyone, all of that. And so there's just a lot to think about. And so the schools that are going to be ready and schools that are going to be able to really help children need to be doing something similar to what we're doing. Supporting the students, supporting the family, have the ability to, within the scope of the same day, go from providing inside your walls education to some of your students to having to shut down, whether it's portions of the school or the whole school, and shift to remote. We're all going to have to be able to do that for at least the next year. And for us, the possibilities are huge, because we've learned things like, so here's one thing that any school in our country could do, anyone could do. And you'll know this because this used to happen to you too. Mm-hmm. So students in schools do something they're not supposed to, so they get sent to in-school suspension, or maybe out of school suspension.
I've done both.
You've done both. And so in schools, you go to in-school suspension and you go to this room. There's a teacher in the room, a teacher assigned to the room, and teachers are supposed to send you work to do. And it's supposed to be quiet. And so you sit there all day long, no interaction. Your work comes or it doesn't come. And the teacher spends the day telling you to be quiet. And so there's nothing going on. So there are a couple things going on there. First of all, behaviorally, schools need to realize that anytime you provide a behavioral intervention 2 or more times and it doesn't change the behavior, it's not the right intervention. And so if you've got, I call them the repeat offenders, the kids who as soon as they get out of in-school suspension, they're back in-school suspension or out of school suspension. If you step back and look at what's really going on there, the majority of the students in that situation are students who care about, they're either students who care about social relationship and what people think about them, or they're students that don't want to have anything to do with everything that goes on in a school, especially a middle school or a high school. And they've learned that they can predict with accuracy, if I do this, if I say this thing, I get to go to in-school suspension or the alternative school or whatever, where they're actually getting what they need, the quiet, the whatever. So what if we know that that's how schools do it now, kick them out of class, in-school suspension or out of school suspension. So what if we did this? What if you have a child who doesn't have to misbehave to go to in-school suspension to get the quiet? What if you have a system set up so that you have your in-school suspension room for the kids that are too disruptive to be in class, and another situation that kids could go to that also is staffed, it's just a quieter place. And in both of those situations, if the teacher continues to teach in the classroom, the kids that go to in-school suspension or to a quieter place, kids with anxiety issues or depression, what if they go into those situations, but what they're doing now is remotely, it's taking place in their school, but they're in a remote location within the school. What if they're still participating in the class in the way that they need to? So the kid who misbehaved and had to go to in-school suspension because he was disruptive, he still can participate in class. The teacher doesn't have to make up packets of work. Kid doesn't have to figure out how to catch up, because the other unspoken truth is very high percentage of kids in school suspension, out of school suspension, expelled, are kids with learning differences and undiagnosed mental health issues. And they need to be able to accurately predict their world and their life. And they learn that they can accurately predict. Like I said, I can accurately predict if I cuss this teacher out in front of all the other kids in class, I'm going to get kicked out of class, which is what they want. And so for many years, I've been doing the complete opposite of that and doing different things. But now, what if we take what we've learned from remote learning when we're back in schools and we use both? What if, like, what we're going to do is, there are so many places in our country that a school like Novus isn't available, and the public school options are so meager, so dim or dismal. Again, not because teachers don't want to or administrators don't want to, but when you're living, say, in a rural, I can't say this word, rural community,
rural,
without a lot of resources, and you've got teachers that mean well, but they don't have the training. Imagine what a family could do if they can live there and their children who don't struggle go to the school, the neighborhood public school or whatever, and the child who struggles can receive an education like a Novus education in real time, participating with peers from wherever they live in South Dakota. And so that's what I'm really starting to prepare for and plan for, is that possibility, because we're seeing it work. Social emotional piece, which we know they need, the support that a child with learning differences needs, and the support that the family raising the child needs, because we do that too with Zoom meetings with our parents and things like that. So I'm not excited. I'm not excited about any of this. I'm thankful that what's going on right now has forced me to quit making up excuses for and procrastinating for not doing what I've wanted to do for years, thought could work for years. So when we were forced into it, here we are. And so now we're in our 5th week of remote learning, and two situations where we've discovered it doesn't work. Remote learning is not working for children we have that have behavioral difficulties that do well in our school. We've worked with them and they do well in our school, but the families aren't willing to do the work that it takes in the home. And so that doesn't work. And it's very difficult with young children because it requires an adult in the home to be with the kindergartner or the first grader to sort of assist them with turning pages and doing things. Even though the teacher is talking to the child and working with the child, they need an adult helping with the logistics. So those are the two groups we found that it doesn't work. And so the way we're handling that is when we have a child who we know if we were face to face, it might take us a couple of weeks to get the behavior in line and get them believing in themselves. But it's going to take longer over remote. We're only going to accept them if the parent agrees that they are open to modifying their parenting practices based on suggestions from us.
Wow.
But the possibilities are endless. And that's why it's so frustrating for me to see so many schools just giving up, because I get it. I understand all of the difficulties with technology and connectivity and all of that. But instead of throwing in the towel, how about you keep things up and running and you're in areas to see what can work, what does work, because you have to be ready to do it. And instead, the whole districts are shutting down instead of continuing. Okay, let's look at the barriers and let's look at the places, the homes where our families don't have barriers, and let's do a study with both of those. Let's see how this can possibly work, because the reality is they're going to have to do it.
Right. So let's say that I am a parent in South Dakota and I am ready to modify my parenting style, but my child has been kicked out of multiple facilities because of his penis guitar. How do I get in touch with you to find out if the Novus Academy is right for me remotely?
So the first thing, excuse me, my ice is went down the wrong part of my throat. The first thing is go to the website.
What's the website?
So we have two, actually, but go to thenovusacademy.org. THENOV like Victor, US, academy.org. Go to the website and take a look at what's going on. Because part of what families have to do is, finding the right school for your child is one of the most difficult things any parent has to do. When they struggle, it's so much more difficult. And so I always tell them, do your homework. Take a look first go to any school's website. So take a look at the website. And then there are things that I advise parents to do they can't do at the moment. And so what I tell families is, particularly in the private school arena, what I tell families is when you've narrowed it down to 2 or 3 schools that you really think might be the right school for your child, you do a couple things. And if you're moving into a new area and you're trying to figure out where are we going to buy our house, this school district or that school district, I tell them to do things that they think they can't do. And so those things are, if it's any school, public or private, no, you don't have to in a public school. In a private school, you usually have to make an appointment to visit with the admissions person, the person in charge of admissions. In a public school, you go and they usually connect you with a registrar to talk about the school. And the job of an admissions person in a private school is to convince you to enroll in the school, because that's how we keep our doors open.
Right.
Tuition and students. And so you have to go through that whole process. And I tell them do that. They do it here, but what we do here is no appointment. Just show up. When they call or they send an email, we don't tell them they have to have an appointment. Just show up. We want them to come in the morning so they see the entire morning celebration, because that sets, tone and culture for the day. And then what I tell them is when you've narrowed it down, you just show up at least twice with no appointment. Don't let them know you're coming, public or private school. And just show up means one time You go without your child, and you show up at the worst possible times of day for school. Drop off, pick up, and lunchtime. That's when things are the most chaotic, because the admissions person, I call it a dog and pony show. The admissions person can tell you everything is great and wonderful, and they usually have you meet a couple kids that are the school ambassadors, and it just feels great and wonderful. But if you just show up at the worst possible times of day for a school, you'll see things like, how do they treat kids here? Do they yell at them? Do they help them? How do the kids treat one another in these situations and settings? Lunchtime is critical. And when you show up, you just say, hey, I'd love to observe a classroom real quick, and I'd love to observe the lunchroom. If they say no, that's not your school. There's your answer.
Right.
Not your school. If they say yes, you look for the things that matter to you. And so for the students we work with, it's things like, is this going to be another school where my child sits alone at lunch? And so you look for that, because, and so you do that. The second time you show up with your child unannounced, and see how your child's treated, and listen to your child. Listen to what they say after they've experienced that. And then you go with your gut. You've done your homework. You've narrowed it down to these schools. Which one do you believe is the right fit for your child and your family? But you're not going to get it website only. You're not going to get it with the appointment only. And so, because parents can't do that now, they can't come in and visit. So what we're doing is, let's say that somebody saw this and they thought they might be interested in our school. They check out the website, they might be interested. Well, we're going to do the same thing we did before, and we're going to invite them to our morning Zoom meeting. Invite them to that 45-minute, see how we start the day thing. If they want to spend some time observing a classroom that's the same, with kids the same age as their child, we'll let them come into the Zoom meeting and observe the classroom. And with our students, what we've done is their names don't appear, because in Zoom, like right now, you can see my name. We've converted everything to initials, so that, that sort of thing's going on. And so that's a way, that's where you would start. And then, so you visit the website. You're not going to be invited into the Zoom meeting or a classroom without having a Zoom meeting with me first, though. And having a conversation about your situation, your child. Talk to me about the school possibilities. And then, then we'll take a look at whether it would be right for you to then, it's the best we can do right now until you're able to see it physically.
So let's say I'm in South Dakota. I'm interested in what I've seen, but I don't have a child with learning differences. I just really like you, and I like what you're doing, and I want to support the Novus Academy and their goal to change education as a whole. And for your specific students, how do I support the Novus Academy without being a student or parent?
That's an excellent question. And it comes down to money. And I'll tell you why. It's, we're a 501c3, we're a nonprofit school. And what we're doing now is the smallest piece of what can be done. And our tuition is about $22,000 when it's all said and done, which is a lot of money. It's not a lot of money in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. A school that would be similar to ours in Dallas is going to be $36,000 a year. So it's $22,000 a year. It doesn't cover our expenses. And what I'm after is, the ultimate goal here is the property that we're in a lease purchase arrangement, because this facility that we're in, I want to purchase it. When we purchase it, when we no longer have the encumberment of a lease payment, we have the full facility. We can open our doors. We can lower tuition. We can get children in here that need to be here, that can't afford to be here, because the truth is, I'm a public school educator to my core. And by that, I mean, I believe every child in our country should have access to this, not have to pay for it. Because the thing that, one of the things that makes me part of who I am is the fact that as a teacher, as an educator, because of what we earn as teachers and educators, I couldn't have you attend the schools that I worked in. So I gave of myself to hundreds, thousands now of families and children, providing them with what they needed and providing them with what you needed, but I couldn't afford to have you in the schools I worked in. And that's not okay. And so as long as people have to pay for something like this, it's not okay. It's also necessary right now. And so things like, you know, we absolutely need to raise money for the facility, but it's other things. It's things like things as simple as donations that would be specifically for financial assistance, or donations that could be designated for different things. But the thing that I need the most is people letting other people know we exist. Point them to the website, take a look at it, because the ultimate goal, and we're not far from it, especially now that we have remote thing going on and looking at purchasing the building. The ultimate goal is what I've been doing for now. What I've been doing for, this is my, how old do we decide you are?
35 or 36. I haven't done the math. I want to say 35.
So then I've been in education for at least 32 years. And which means there are more years behind me than in front of me. And because my goal is, I don't want any child to have a diagnosis to access this. I don't want any family to have money to access this. It's what we need to be doing in our schools. Part of what I'm looking at, and I've been doing for years, is we invite educators in to see it and learn from us, because that's how we impact, that's how the numbers grow. If we can teach a teacher or an administrator how to change something simple, so it doesn't have to be Novus with all of this. There's so many things that can be tweaked, don't cost any money, things that can be done. And then that teacher teaches another teacher, because the root of everything in education, as an educator, our profession still is not treated as a profession. When you, if you're at a gathering where people are saying, oh, what do you do for a living? Or, you know, that dreaded, what do you do question, which means, what do you do for a living? So then I can decide whether you're worthy of me having a conversation with you. And I challenge you to do this. In a situation like that, if someone is a teacher, they look down, they look away, they make excuses, and they say words that are the equivalent of, well, I'm just a teacher, in that way. And for years, I've been saying, we need to stand up tall and proud and look you in the eye and say, I'm a professional educator. And here's the thing about all of this. Through my work, I'm impacting generations I'll never meet through the work that I do on a daily basis. There's a problem with it, though. A teacher has the power to lift a child and set them on a course that will serve them well in life. A teacher can also completely destroy a child with their words or their actions. And so the big dream, the big goal is that at Novus, we're completely changing professional development for educators and what that looks like, but taking it, notching it up. There's a medical model for therapeutic intervention, and there's an educational model. Medical is much better. Educational is what we can kind of do, and the two don't communicate well. And I've had the great part in my career. I spent 6.5 years at the Child Study Center running their school, and that's where I learned what's possible, and I was able to experiment and start figuring these things out. I was also able to hone my assessment skills based on medical models, so blending medical model of intervention and the educational model. So part of what I want to do with this facility is I want to bring clinicians, physicians, and educators together and train together using the school as the model to see that if we aren't working in our silos, if we're working together to do this, no telling what could be. This all came about because I started a nonprofit called What If We Could. And you can find What If We Could by going to the Novus Academy website.
Mm-hmm.
And I suggest you do, because it gives you, go to the Novus website, look at that. But the What If We Could website that you can access through the Novus website will give you greater insight into what do experts in our country, what do people who know what they're seeing when they see it, what do they say about Novus? You can see that piece of it. So really, if everybody needs money, every school needs money, and we do. But what I really need is I need, if you see this, if you hear about Novus, it might not apply to you, but you might know somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Let them know we exist, because here's the thing. The thing about all of this is every one of us, every single person walking the planet, we are all a birth, an accident, or an illness away from being impacted by a disability or disorder. You don't know when you find out that you're pregnant, you don't know. Babies that are born healthy with no issues, that's a miracle. So you don't know. And that's how it can happen by birth. Accident, things as simple as, we have a student in our school who was in a terrible, terrible automobile accident. Her
Mm-hmm.
father was killed. She lost a portion of her brain, was never going to walk or talk or see or any of those things again. You'd never know it. You would never know it. And what happened was her mom was living in outside of Amarillo, Texas, couldn't get what she needed, and she wasn't going to settle for what the doctor said, and she moved here. And so she's in our school, and you'd never know. All the things that they were told she'd never do. Mm-mm. And it's not just Novus. It's a mother who does everything that it takes to make sure her child doesn't give up, which goes to, why are we throwing in the towel in our schools, in our country right now, when that's the worst possible thing we could be doing? What we're doing is we're teaching a whole country full of kids, when you face adversity, roll over. When it's too tough, give up. When in fact, we should be leading by example and asking the kids, what do you need? That's what we do. That's how we've been tweaking this whole full day online thing. We're asking the kids, what do you need? What would you like to see? What would work for you? For graduation, it's been very interesting, because I told the students, I gathered the students are supposed to graduate, and I said, here's the thing. Right now, especially, adults make all the decisions. Adults do these things. You're about to walk out into the world. I don't need to be telling you what your graduation is going to be like. I don't need to be telling you we're not going to New York City for the International Model United Nations Conference. I mean, that's a given. I need to be listening to you. What do you need? What do you want? And so in our school, their decision, and I didn't ask their parents either, ask the kids. And so their consensus is they don't want to officially graduate until they can officially graduate in person, have their families in person, them in person. And so they have decided that we'll do they'll have, because most of them are going to college, so they'll have their diploma. And then when it's safe, and it might be, we might be looking at this time next year with other students that might be graduating. They're going to come back and have their ceremony because they want to. Not being able to go to New York City for our International Model UN competition and senior trip, what they decided is maybe we make it a reunion trip instead of the other, because then they can come back from college or wherever they are. And so Versus, like, if I was just making the decision, I wouldn't have come up with those things. I would
Right.
probably come up with virtual graduation or, something like that. That's not what they wanted. And so that's the other piece of this. If your school or school district and this whole remote learning thing is, it's eating your lunch, ask the kids, what do they need? What could work? And the other piece of it is, a big complaint is, in the situations where kids have the technology, they have bandwidth, but they're not logging in to their classes. The question we need to ask ourselves as educators is, what are we doing so that they would want to be there?
Right.
And that's the biggest is, would I want to sit in your classroom? Would I want to log in? Especially knowing that, that attention span at best is a couple minutes. What are we as educators doing so that our kids can't wait to log in the morning and spend the day with us? And that's what we do.
Wow.
So,
Mom, thank you. I for someone who talks literally for a living, I don't know what else to say. Thank you. I will do my very best to make sure that as many people get the opportunity to see this. I will do my very best to make sure that I provide a space where people want to log in and watch. But thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being my mom. Thank you for being so inspirational. I haven't had to do a whole lot of talking on my own talk show.
yeah, and that's just not right. Can you ask say something?
Yeah, let's
Ask me something hard.
Okay. On the days that you just can't anymore, because we're all having them. On the days where you're just done, completely overwhelmed, what are you doing to take care of yourself? What are you doing to acknowledge your emotions, live in them, and move through them?
That's a great question. So I'm doing what we're teaching our students to do. And that's every day they know that I'm going to say this, and I say it to them because I have an end of the day meeting too. They know that I'm going to say, it's a beautiful day. Get yourself outside. Do not stay in your house. Get yourself outside, do something, send us pictures of what you're doing outside physically. So for me, it's working on the gardens in the backyard, in the front yard, things I've wanted to do for years, but I haven't made the time. To say there's no time is an excuse. I haven't made the time. So for me, it's the physicality of being outside, doing something. And it's usually when people are, and I'm no different, when we get to that point where we're so overwhelmed, we shut down. When we can find the one thing we can control, that's a tangible thing that we can control. Like for me, it used to be like around here, staff members and teachers would know if I'm in the kitchen organizing the silverware drawer, that's where I am. It's too much. And I know that I can go into the silverware drawer. I can put the forks where they're supposed to be, the knives, I can line them up. It won't take forever. And it's a sense of accomplishment. I was able to do it. And so that's what I do with the being outside. I also we teach mindfulness practices, and I use mindfulness practices. It's the acknowledging the feelings. But the weird thing about it, Chris, is that, I think part of it's a product of age, but I think the other piece of it is I really don't have those times. Nothing about the work I do has ever been easy. Nothing about Novus ever has, nor will it ever be easy. But here's the difference. I've created a space that I love to be in. My profession is perfectly aligned with my purpose and passion. And every day I see a tangible, a positive something. Sometimes I have to, with some children or families, you have to look so hard to find that one thing. But I see it every day. And so for me right now, and I'm certain for our teachers, if we weren't doing full day, if we weren't interacting visually and verbally with our kids and our families, I'd be telling a different story.
Yeah.
This would be tough because, so I really don't, I just have learned in life to take whatever adversity, whatever is there, because there's been a lot, and you look for the lesson. And so for me, this whole thing about schools is the easy thing would be to do the same thing. I could conceivably do what so many are doing and say, let's it's a lot of stress going on. Let's go ahead and just end the year and we'll ramp up for next year. And that would give me a lot of time to work on the gardens, to, to do that kind of paint some rooms, do those sorts of things, get to see Addie and spend time with Addie. But that wouldn't be right, because this is what keeps me going and what motivates me. And the other piece of it is, I lived most of my life with this belief that we don't have choices. Like, I would stay too long working at a school that I hated because I didn't have a choice. I had to have a job, had to take care of you guys. I was going to, earning degrees and stuff. And what I've come to realize is that is not true. There is no such thing in life as not having a choice, ever. You can choose. You might not like what it's going to take, but I only do this. I only use this example with high school students when I know that they can handle it. And what I tell them is, here's the thing: no such thing, ever. There's nothing that could possibly happen to you in your life that you don't have choice over. Things like you have a terminal COVID, you have a terminal illness, you're going to die. You can still choose some of the conditions under which that's going to happen. Right. If a horrible scenario, someone has a gun to your head, you can't choose whether you're going to live or die, but you can choose, am I going to stand here? Am I going to drop down? Am I going to scream? Am I going to pray? What am I going to do? So those are just, big, the odds of them happening are very slim examples, but I go there with the kids to get them to realize, with the regular daily stuff, I'm in a relationship and I have to stay. I can't get out of it. I don't have a choice. Not true. What it comes down to is, are you willing to do what it takes to move from the situation that you don't like and you believe you don't have a choice in, to, are you willing to do the work that's going to take to get yourself into the situation that you want to be in? And it was your grandpa that taught me, because, I have the ADHD and was a lousy student because for most of school, I didn't have to study. I did well until I got to college. And then it was like, who knew you had to actually go to class?
Right. They don't tell you that part.
No. And do the work. And then who knew that when you decide you're just not going to go anymore, you're going to withdraw from the class, if you don't actually turn the paperwork in, who knew? They're going to give you an F anyways. WF.
I've got so many WFs. No degree, just a bunch of WFs.
Well, I have 2 degrees, had a ton of WFs in the beginning. And your grandpa told me one time, he said, here's the thing. To get to what you want to do, which is make a difference for people, to get to what you want to do, all you need is the piece of paper. You don't need an A. You don't need a B. You just need credit in the class. Because when you get to if what you want to do requires a college degree, when you finally get to the level that you're taking the courses that you're interested in, it's not work. It's not work, but so many of us give up because we get too many WFs, or just flat out Fs. Yeah. And we don't get to where we want to go. And so when and it wasn't this big like epiphany or emotional thing. It was when I realized, okay, if I get C's, he's still going to pay for school. That's really what it was at the time. Yeah. Which then turned into this, this big thing, this big philosophical thing. But it's true. It's true if you think about it. With all of this, we still have choices. If you lose your job, that's a terrible thing. I've lost jobs. I know it's a terrible, horrible thing. At the same time, you now have time on your hands to be figuring out, well, what do I want to do?
Yeah.
what am I really interested in? What do I, and so, and I've also, last thing I'm gonna say is I've also learned stuff is stuff. Used to, there was a point, in you growing up and our life, we lost a house, had to file bankruptcy. Felt like the end of the world. It was so shameful. It was like, and it was just, so now what I always talk to kids and people about in bad situations is this a forever or is it a for now? COVID is not a forever. It's a for now. And we just have to learn from it because we're not going to be the same on the other side. Schools aren't going to be the same. The things we do aren't going to be the same. And I'm hopeful that what a lot of us are discovering is that it's really nice to be going slower. Like I really have come to enjoy not getting up on a Saturday morning to get out of the house to go shopping. I like not doing that. Or before, because I am a recreational shopper.
It's true. I see it.
No. I like spending time. I love when I and this is not, I'm not trying to plead or beg, but I will. It's given us the opportunity to spend time with Addie. She comes to the school. She comes and stays with us because we're quarantining and social distancing. And so it's safe and we have the time. And so I'm hoping that what a big takeaway for all of us is going to be the importance of, there are rough times with family. And there's some kids in horrible situations in their homes right now. But I'm going to start living what I preach. And what I preach to kids is sometimes you have to go slow to go fast. Sometimes you have to take a step back and have a reset when they're struggling with work or they come to us and they're several years below grade level. And so sometimes you have to go slow to go fast, which means you have to slow down, look at everything that's happening, learn from the experience, improve your skills, because when that happens, you're ready to then go fast. And so maybe COVID's teaching us, slow down so you can go fast. And so that's what I'm doing. And
Love it.
When do we get Addie next?
You at 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay.
2 or 3 weeks. You can have her in 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay.
Well then, Mom, I love you so much. It's a beautiful day.
I love you too. You need to get outside. I'm going to get out of here and go spend a little bit of time in the backyard.
You earned it.
Love you.
I love you too.
Bye.
Bye. Well, that's it. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for spending some time with me and my mom this evening. And on that note, it's a beautiful day. How about you get outside? Woo-hoo.